order the May 6th Newmarket Town Council meeting.
I will read the order. As the chair of the town declared that due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis, in accordance with the Governor Signage Emergency Order 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, the town council is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the Governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional public access possibilities by video or other means. We're using GoToMeeting platform for this meeting. All members of the council have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the GoToMeeting platform, and the public has access to the contemporaneously listened to, and if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the phone number 1-866-899-4679 with the access code 672-707-173, or by watching on the town website at newmarketnh.gov and channel 13 locally. We previously gave notice to the public on how to access the meeting using GoToMeeting and instructions that are provided on the town of Newmarket's website at newmarketnh.gov. And if there's any problem, please call 603-659-3617, extension 1321. And if you're able to access the meeting, we'll adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at another time. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call. So we'll start by doing attendance, and much like with the participating remotely, please say aye, and then if there's anybody in the room with you. Councilor Finch.
Aye, and there's nobody in the room with me.
Councilor Sanders.
Aye, and there's no one in the room with me.
Councilor Dumont.
Aye, and I am alone.
Councilor Kuiper.
Aye, and there is no one in the room with me.
Councilor Matthews.
Aye and alone.
Councilor Burns.
Aye and alone.
Councilor Weinstein.
Aye, and there's no one here with me.
Okay, that's it.
Great. The first order of business is I would accept a motion to leave non-public, or
Seal the minutes of non-public
the
session.
minutes of the non-public. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to seal the minutes of non-public.
I will second.
Seeing no questions, if you could call the roll, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
Did we even have someone taking minutes during that?
Yeah. I mean, there's basic minutes. We didn't take any. There were no actions taken, but just a general conversation. So yeah, I'll put that together.
Thanks. Ready?
Yes, I'm sorry. If you could call the roll.
Councilor Finch.
Aye.
Councilor Sanders.
Aye.
Councilor Dumont.
Aye.
Councilor Kuiper.
Aye.
Councilor Matthews.
Nay.
Councilor Burns.
Aye.
Councilor Weinstein.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is for the town council to consider the acceptance of minutes, and we have minutes from our April 15th meeting, and I would accept a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting on April 15th, 2020.
I will second.
Were there any questions, changes, corrections? Seeing none, if you could call the roll, please.
Councilor Finch.
Aye.
Councilor Sanders.
Aye.
Councilor Dumont.
Abstain.
Councilor Kuiper.
Aye.
Councilor Matthews.
Aye.
Councilor Burns.
Aye.
Councilor Weinstein.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0 to 1.
Thank you. A quick question before we move on. I had gotten an email from Wendy Chase earlier, I think earlier today or yesterday, with like the I don't know what you call it, when people have the remote um, when people have questions or or they want to make comments. Do you know what that is, or if we should be using that? I didn't really know how to use it, Steve. I don't know if you had any
Do you mean like the
information.
phone number or?
No, just like the status if somebody kind of has their, if they want to make a comment for, you know, like we used to have on the iPad.
Oh, yeah, we can still do that. You would have to open up a second window on your
Oh,
browser because you don't have the little iPad with you.
okay. The why
Yeah,
we had
I think
why
it's
should
just kind of, yeah.
okay. So we can
Is
just
that-
still
Yep,
we'll raise hands. Okay. So
Yeah.
sorry, I wanted to
no problem.
couldn't think of what that's called.
Yeah.
So the next item on our agenda is the report of the town administrator. So if you could, or I should say town manager.
That's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. There is no written report. I will have a presentation at the end of it as part of like orientation for the new counselors and just a refresher for everybody on the role of the town council and the role of the council when it comes to staff. I did want to give some updates on the coronavirus. First thing is, you probably heard that there's going to be $40 million from the CARE funds that would be distributed to local governments, 32 million of that to municipal governments, and 8 million to county governments. We are anticipating receiving $223,000. The way that it works is that we can use it for purchase of equipment, like barriers, disinfectants, etc., computer equipment for remote working, as well as other items. What it cannot be used is anything that can be reimbursed by FEMA, which is any police and fire. In addition, we cannot go over the 223,000, but if we go under, we do not receive the entire amount. So that's through the CARES Act. In addition, you probably saw that the first responders will be receiving additional stipends that police and fire full-time will be receiving an additional $600 a week for 8 weeks and 2 days. And we're still determining on some of the laws as a result of that. Oh, and I'm sorry, and the part-timers are receiving $150. I'm trying to think. I may have misstated it, but we're still trying to figure out some of the laws as it relates to that. For example, who pays the taxes on it? What does it, does New Hampshire retirement system come from that? There's a lot of questions right now. We've been on the phone the last 2 days since it's been announced. One thing you'll find out is when it gets announced at a press conference, we don't receive the backup documentation for a few days. It's really the general idea, and then they hammer out all the details. For example, everyone's seeing those new stay-at-home 2.0 orders. We have the same information that everybody else has. Like, for example, with the restaurants, which I'll get to shortly, where it says 6 feet between tables. Well, is that 6 feet between tables plus 2 feet, quote unquote, for the patrons next to the table, or how does that work? And they're still trying to get us some guidelines on that. So as everybody knows, the governor announced stay-at-home 2.0. So beginning May 11th, there will be retail establishments can reopen with guidelines in place with 50% capacity, as well as masks worn by staff, and they will need to have a safety person to monitor those items. In addition, golf courses can open on May 11th with certain rules that are also on this stay-at-home 2.0 website, and as well as hair and barbers can open that day as well. On May 18th, restaurants will be able to open for outside service only. We are working on that to set up guidelines for the town side of it, including temporary permits for this year only that will allow businesses to do sidewalk sales. And there's still questions we don't have all the answers yet on as a result, blanket on the word, as it means about alcohol sales. Whether or not, because alcohol sales at this point, you still need to have a barrier between the public and where they're sitting. And there's discussions now in Concord whether or not that's going to be waived or not. So we're not sure where that is yet. And we're supposed to hear sometime this week. And I think I saw an email sometime last night, but I have not gone through those documents yet today. We'll be waiving any fees associated with the permits for temporary outside eating establishments. We just think anything we can do to help them get out there, we will. And in addition, we'll have a separate individual from the normal building inspector doing all the inspections of that so they can get that done quicker. We've only heard of one at this point in time interested, but I'm assuming we'll get more as soon as more of the guidelines come out. We're meeting almost daily again to just try to hammer out all the new guidelines of what we can and cannot do and what our jobs are when it comes to enforcement of these items. We had a legal call today with the Homeland Security, and how do we enforce the wearing of masks in businesses? How do we enforce regulations? And they're getting more guidance from the Attorney General's office, and we should be getting that information shortly. As for the opening of Town Hall, we're in town buildings. We're still reviewing that. We want to make sure that we protect not only the public, but also the employees, that we continue to have barriers between the public and the employees. And we want to make sure that's all installed and ready to go before we open to the public. We have secured sanitizing equipment that we do on a periodic basis. So all buildings are sanitized. So, which is basically almost like a fogger, and they walk around and everything gets sanitized. We're not expecting probably Town Hall to open till the end of the month, just because we want to make sure everything is in the right order before we do that. That people can still do a majority of the services online, and those that they cannot, we are accepting appointments, and the town clerk or whatever department will meet them outside to provide them with that service. That is all I have on that. Is there any questions before I get into the presentation on the corona response?
Steve,
Councilor Dumont. Yeah.
sorry. Without wanting to sound obtuse about this, you'd mentioned $600 a week stipends for police, fire, EMS. Have they at any point during this lockdown seen a reduction in salary from the town side? And are we planning on that at any point in the future, out of curiosity?
Well, police are covered by collective bargaining agreement, so there's no reduction in salary there. Fire has not. There's been no reduction in any salaries. This is, the governor announced this to be a hazard pay stipend for first responders.
No, I understand. I was curious to know how we were doing on that side of things, and wanting to make sure that we are still paying our first responders.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
All right, Councilor Matthews.
Hey, Steve, have you given any thought to waiving the license fee for sidewalk stands and vendors also, who are kind of in the same position of wanting to use public sidewalks for business purposes?
I mean, do you mean restaurants or do you mean?
I mean, sidewalk vendors, it's in the municipal code. It's like a person who has like a push cart wagon, they can set up on the sidewalk.
Oh, we could look at that.
There's a $50 fee.
Yeah, we could look at that when it comes. I don't think we've had one.
Yeah, I don't.
So, but we can look at that as well. The only thing there though is if you have a food cart right in front of a restaurant, sometimes it's not a favorite thing of the restaurant owners. So we would have to look at that as well. One additional thing I did want to mention is that we should be hearing shortly about guidelines for day camps and recreation on how that's going to look on coming this summer. We've seen some draft guidelines put out by the governor's reopening committee, but those aren't final yet.
Councillor Kuiper.
I had noticed the last couple days, I think obviously because people are only getting takeout food, that the trash bins like in Shanda Park were more full than usual, and it was mainly takeout containers. So I don't know if we might at some point give some thought to either, I don't know, just keeping a better eye on it, or putting out more trash for the takeout containers, because I think there's a substantial number of people who I would say the majority of the restaurants are going to have a hard time putting 6 feet tables, because you also have to have 6 feet from somehow you have to have 6 feet from the tables and 6 feet from the waiter or waitress taking the order. So like you do too many places with a patio or sidewalk big enough for more than a table or two. So I feel like there's probably going to be a lot of people getting food to go and eating, in Shanda Park or whatever park, or and the kind of ironic part or funny part is, like, someone can get takeout food and sit at a bench and they're within 4 feet of a pedestrian, but you couldn't serve them food there legally. You'd have to be 6 feet away. So it might be in some ways easier to just incentivize people to get takeout food and go wherever. Obviously they can't consume alcohol, but it's maybe a little bit easier than, for some of the restaurants might be easier to just keep doing the takeout thing, because I think the restaurants that have been open, mine included, have been very busy with takeout. Because there's only about, I think probably 30% of the restaurants are open. I would say, at least from my perspective, the other ones I've seen, they all seem to be fairly well, getting pretty good business. So I think that's one good thing. And I actually am looking forward to more restaurants being open, because it's been kind of crazy. So that's my 2 cents on those rules.
Yep, we can check the bins. It could be also that we haven't brought back seasonal employees yet, just because we want to watch spending. But I'll talk to Public Works Director on that. Anything else before oh, go ahead.
I have a couple questions. One is about the guidance for the restaurants, and so it's my understanding that outdoor seating will be allowed, but it's still no indoor seating at all.
That is correct.
That's correct. And then my other question is that, and I brought this up to you via email today, that in the new guidance, all servers will need to be wearing masks.
Mm-hmm.
But currently, there isn't any regulation around masks, if I understand correctly. Right.
That's
so,
correct.
and I know that there are restaurants in town where the servers are not wearing masks. And I know that there's no blanket guidance from the governor to say that masks should be worn at all times. But when does the new ordinance supersede the old one, and how? I know you mentioned enforcement. I'm just curious what the role of the town is. Is it the health officer? Is there any enforcement that we can do at all?
Good question. One is, as it relates to masks now, it's not the individual working the counter. It's a person providing the food, and you're not supposed to be near that individual as long as a server could be, or as close. You should still, an individual should drop it, walk away, and the other person should pick it up. That's what's supposed to be, supposed to happen. As it means for masks, it's either the health officer or the police that would be enforcing this. They're still trying to get us guidance on that. That was actually a big discussion today under what regulations do we have to enforce it, and how do you enforce it, to the point where we would have to, it sounds like we have to send a letter first and then go in there. It's not just a blanket, go in there and give a fine or a ticket. There's actually a procedure that would have to follow. So it could be cumbersome as well, but they're trying to figure that out.
Great, thank you. The other thing is, I was curious, is there a sense, I'm assuming that you have some idea of what expenses we've had at this point that are COVID related and just where we are with the accounting of it all. Can you give us an update on that?
Sure. We have we set up a special account. Anytime we get a bill, we send it to this account. Problem is, we're now going to have to separate FEMA reimbursable items from CARE reimbursable items. I would say we probably have spent all up, all in, probably about $100,000 to $125,000. But we still, and that's both FEMA and CARE. So we would still have a significant amount of expenses. A lot of these things are going to be when we do reopen. What are we going to look like? How are we going to make sure we're safe for all the facilities? And one of the big things is I want to wait to get the ruling on the recreation department to make sure that they have all the equipment that they're going to need if they're able to open up this summer, to make sure everybody's safe.
Councillor Dumont?
Is there a general breakdown on that 100 grand for COVID related items? Is that mostly PPE, or is that like?
I would say there's some PPE, there's overtime, there's I'll get the figures.
The overtime makes sense. I just wasn't sure what would fall under that 100 grand marker, but thank you.
Councillor Matthews?
Hey, Steve, is the parking lot at the rail trail, is that actually private land?
It depends. Part of it is owned by the state, part of it is owned as private land, and that's it. That's the two portions. The private landowner does not want people trespassing, but the state lot is the state. They're allowed to open it. That's why we just closed the parking on Ash Swamp Road, because it was getting overflowed and the road was getting too narrow to get emergency vehicles down there. So that's why there's no parking on Ash Swamp.
Do you have a timeline as to when that might be open? You know, opening up one side of the road, couple spots?
No. We want to make sure that, because once you open it, it's going to get packed again. And we literally have buses parked down there. And that's not a place to have buses, because it's just the curvy nature of that road. And we're just concerned for the safety.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to think of like, is there any timeline at all? Or is this just, you know, if a bus shows up, we close it? I mean, at some point, police will have to enforce this and give tickets and get people towed, right, if they're going to be parking there. But, you know, we can't keep this closed forever.
We can keep it closed as long as the police determine it as an emergency. And at this point,
For what it's worth, I've noticed a change in signage over the last couple of days, and I haven't gone down to look, but I drive past there several times a day, and there's cars parked like right at the gate, and I guess that's probably the state land, so there is some parking. And then I noticed that the no parking signs in the parking area, like not along the road, but in the parking area, that those aren't there, or they weren't there today when I drove by. So I don't know how new that is.
I believe it's on Monday. Those came down. Public Works Director let me know.
Councillor Dumont?
Forgive me, I've not been on the rail trail ever. Is that down by the old train station buildings where we're talking about for parking?
Exactly.
Thanks. I'm just checking it out on a map.
There were a few weekends in the beginning where parking stretched. I mean, the cars were lined up. I think at one point my car was one of those cars. Were lined up along Ash Swamp Road, pretty far past the ballroom.
And we did get a number of complaints from the residents in that area too. It wasn't just on Action. We did receive complaints from the neighbors. Okay.
My other question, I have one more.
Sure.
Sorry.
That's
And
okay.
this is about elections, and I know that you probably don't have that much information. I was actually on a call right before this for something different, and I know that the rules, everyone is waiting for more guidance from the state around absentee voting. So I'm curious, a couple things. One, if you had any information, which I'm guessing that you
Do
probably
not.
don't, about the
Nope.
absentee. But then also about any funds that might come to municipalities for poll workers protection and increased cost of the absentee ballots.
That's in the 223,000 that we get.
Oh, so that's part of that.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So we don't, yeah, so we'll have to use that as well.
Great. Councillor Dumont.
Yes, for the town manager. Last time we had spoke about absentee ballots, I believe you had told me that you can get one if you're not able to be in town on that day.
That has been lifted for this
That's
election.
what I wanted to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
It's basically, and wording in front of me, but my understanding is if you do not feel safe going to the polls, you can request an absentee ballot now. So if you do not feel safe, you can do that.
Has there been a noticeable uptick recently that the town clerk is like it's out of the question right now, or are we still seeing the same general number of absentee ballot requests at this point?
You know, I don't know. I don't know if we have absentee ballots yet. The filing period hasn't opened yet.
That's a good point. Scratch the question.
So I don't think we have.
Well, people can still request the ballot. They just won't
Right.
get sent out for quite a
Right.
while because, I mean, the primary is only in 4 months. It feels like it's a long time from now, but we're going to blink and it's going to be
Yep.
here. So that's why I ask these questions. But my understanding is that some of that guidance is going to come out next week. That's what.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping. And we're already setting up a meeting with the moderator and the clerk to discuss what we may need to do.
Awesome. Because I think getting that information out to people and then how the clerk and the moderator are going to, I mean, because still, I'm sure people will come to the polls. And so how they're going to make sure that people are safe and protected, because this will, I mean, we're going to be grappling with this in September and then again in November.
Yeah.
It's not going away.
And November will be probably the more difficult of the two since it's presidential. One thing I'm kicking around in my mind is maybe asking if we could have 2 polling places to allow for smaller crowds and to be able to do spacing. I know some cities all do. They have separate wards. Some towns do have separate polling places. But I think that's something we may want to look at.
Wow. Councillor Dumont.
I'll just say now, I would support looking into that further. I would just have some questions about whether that, means we have to set up some pseudo wards or how we figure that there's one ballot per person amongst, 2 locations, 3 locations, whatever.
Say if A from G go to one polling place, H through Z go to the other.
All right.
So, yeah, that's it. That's how some of them do that. You don't have to do, if you're doing it just because of space, that would be one recommendation. It's not, since you don't have district representation, you don't have to worry about the ward, like district lines, but that's something we'd just have to look at.
Oh, Councillor Matthews.
Hey, Steve, has the finance started looking at scenarios where, we're not having, 5% of property taxes paid, 10%, or we don't get 25% of meals and room back from the state? Any scenarios like that being looked at and kind of the scale of what we could be dealing with this, and that will eventually fall to property taxpayers to make up?
Right, we are. I didn't. One of the things we did determine, though, which is we're waiting for another some kind of ruling from the governor's office, is that we're not allowed to, since we still have a budgetary town meeting, the council cannot reduce expenses. They can only reduce expenditures. So what that means is I can say, okay, we're not spending $100,000 on roads, but I still have to raise that through taxation to cover the $100,000. Derry has in their charter, which I don't want to do another charter amendment right away, but it may be something in the future that allows the council, upon advice of the town manager, to reduce budgeted amounts. So you don't have that in case of emergency. And that's what we're actually asking, may ask the governor to do, is give us that authority this for all municipalities. If we didn't have a budgetary town meeting, if we didn't have a budgetary town meeting, the council is the legislative body for the budget and they can just do it. So it doesn't, we wouldn't need permission. But since we still have that, that's one of the hindrances. So even if, say if revenues didn't come in and we were down 50% in rooms and meals, we couldn't cut the expenditures by 50% to make it up. It automatically goes up on the tax rate to do that. The other thing is, yes, we are looking at that, of course. We're looking at reducing our expenses and putting freezes in just in case, because we still don't want to, expend things that we don't need to, especially if we have surpluses, then it goes back in the fund balance and we can use that to offset expenses in the next year. One thing to remember, gas taxes, we are 1 year in the rears. So we would be, anything we receive this year is based on last year's numbers. So we would receive the amount as anticipated. Room and meals are not. And one of the things that we cannot use that $223,000 for is filling in for lack of revenues from the state. The governor made that clear as well. That's one of the problems that we have right now. And the governor keeps saying that we need to tighten our budgets. Well, municipalities in the state already passed their budget, and we can't go back and change it without permission. And again, another thing that bothers us is that recently he's been only calling the 13 mayors of the cities instead of talking to all municipalities. Well, it's great, but the 13 mayors, one, their budgets aren't due until July 1, and two, only 2 of those mayors are actually the chief executives of their community. The other 11 have city managers. So it's kind of a concerning thing when the governor only talks to really 2 chief executives from the 2 largest cities and not worrying about what the smallest communities have. Any other questions on this? Okay, so try to get some normalcy here. Usually at the first meeting after the election, I do a presentation on the roles of the town council and staff and the town manager. So I'm going to try this and see if I can share my screen. Hold on. Is that working? Hold on. There it goes. Got it. Of course, one thing that's blocked is okay. Hold on. Great. Okay. Town council orientation. First, I want to go over what are the 4 basic types of local government in New Hampshire. I think that's what really important because you're going to hear a lot of things when it refers to Newmarket as being a town and what things that we can and cannot do. And so I want to go over the 4 basic forms. The first is what they refer to as a strong mayor and a board of aldermen. What they do is the people elect a CEO to run the city. They have the title of the mayor. The people then elect a representative body to set policy for the city, and that's called the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. There's only 2 cities in the state of New Hampshire with this form of government, and those are Manchester and Nashua. The next form is the council manager form, and this should sound familiar. Voters elect a legislative body for the city or town, which is called the city or town council. The head of the council serves as the figurehead for the community, which is also can be called the mayor or the council chair. And the council hires a professional CEO to run the community, which is the city. There are 11 cities and 7 towns in the state that have this form of government. In this area, the cities of Portsmouth, Dover, Rochester, and Somersworth, and the towns of Durham and Newmarket. These two forms of government that we discussed are outlined, what we call charter communities. They all have constitutions, which are called municipal charters, that outline how their governments are operating. The next is the select board, SB2 form of government. Voters elect a select board to serve as the governing body. They may appoint the town manager or administrator to be the chief administrative officer of the community. The town meeting serves as a legislative body. Town meeting votes on the budget as well as any ordinances that, including zoning and other ordinances that the municipality may pass. They have two sessions. First is the deliberative session, which people meet to debate and amend articles. And then the people vote on town meeting day and approve the articles. There are 68 towns in the state that are SB2, and those are in the area are Exeter, Hampton, Rye, and Barrington. Finally, we have the select board traditional town meeting. Voters elect a select board to serve as the governing body. They may appoint a town manager or administrator to be the chief administrative officer. They do not have to. The only form of government that has to have an administrator is the council manager form of government. The town meeting serves as a legislative body, meets annually to approve the warrant articles and the annual budget. This is most towns in the state. Around here, Stratham and Newington are traditional town meeting municipalities. So what's the role of the town council? Town council serves as a legislative and governing body of the town. In corporate speak, the residents and voters are shareholders, the town council is the board of directors, and the town manager serves as the CEO. Just a reminder, one of the big things are town councils are not select boards. So when you look up a state law or you hear something referring to select boards, you have to make sure that it relates to town councils as well. Town councils have some authority of select boards, but the town manager in our form of government has some of that authority as well. The town charter says the council has all powers of city councils except to pass the budget. State law says council have the powers of selectmen, city councils, and of course an alderman, and all actions of a city apply to town councils. So basically, Newmarket in government is closer to Dover and Portsmouth than it is to Exeter and Hampton. So what's the role of the town council, the town manager? Things they can't do. The town council cannot get involved in the day-to-day operations of the town. That's in the charter as well as state law. The town council appoints a chief executive officer under RSA 49D. The town manager shall have all authority as a city manager according to state law, including appoints with a town council approval all department heads, disciplines employees including termination, proposes the budget and CIP to the town council, and there's a full list of everything in the town charter. The way to look at it is this: the town council makes policy and the town manager and the staff carry out the policy. Things to remember: that the town council must act as a body. No one town council can influence the acts of the town manager or any other employee, direct the appointment or termination of an employee, or interfere with the duties of an employee. Councilors must deal with employees through the town manager. This is one of those rare situations. A violation of that is a forfeiture of office under RSA 49D. The next is the town council must adopt all laws of the town. We hear many times that, oh, I want a petition to change that law. Under a council manager form of government, we do not have that authority. The council has to do that. The only thing that can be petitioned in our form of government is raising appropriations at town meeting or an amendment to the town charter. Council has budgetary control. The municipal budget committee and the town meeting only approve the bottom line of the budget. What's that mean? That during the year, say if we had a shortage in one department and overage in another, I would come to the town council and request a transfer from one to the other. Also, that just because it was appropriated, again, it doesn't mean it has to be expended. So if the council says, look, we're not going to spend $100,000 extra on roads, we don't expend that. The town manager also has financial responsibilities. The town manager must approve any manifest for payments, sets the pay for all employees, establishes a purchasing code, and appoints the town treasurer. And that's different than most towns where the town treasurer is an elected position. few years ago, the charter was amended to have the town manager appoint the town treasurer. Just some other things to remember. Realize that you're on a team. Also, that you represent the community at all times. You're doing this for public service, not to benefit personally, politically, or professionally. And one of the big things is, which I hear quite often, is, well, I'm doing this, but I'm not a town councilor. You can't turn off being a town councilor. You're always a town councilor. You don't get to say, well, I'm asking for this assistance, but I'm not doing that as a town. You don't get to say when you are and when you're not. Once you accept the position, you're always one. The way I always said it was that, say if you were to get arrested for some reason, if you were a regular citizen, your name would be in the back of the newspaper in the arrest log. Once you became an elected official, your name goes on the front page of the paper if something like that would happen. So just remember that you just cannot turn it off. Just other relations with each other. You should set long and short-term goals and objectives as a team. We're going to look into see if Primex can somehow hold a goal-setting session remotely. We've done this last few years in person, but we're not sure how well it will work. You need to be good listeners and good team players. This is a good one. Disagree without being disagreeable. Just because you don't agree on everything doesn't mean you have to argue and take it outside of a meeting. I don't know if everybody knows that when I started, I was actually a city councilor in the city around here. And there would be councilors that had fights in meetings and arguments. But as soon as the gavel banged at the end of the meeting, that was the end, because that's it. The meeting was over. It's a difference between the two. Treat each other and staff with respect, despite differences of opinion. Make decisions after all facts have been presented and discussed. Snap judgments. Realize that the actions of the council as a whole are binding. No councilor can act alone. The role of the town council chair. The town council chair is the first among equals. They have no more authority than any other councilors except what's written in the rules or in the charter. They run the meetings and assist the council in reaching decisions and moving discussion forward. And they act as a liaison between the council and the town manager. And they also help resolve conflicts between the two. And they also serve the ceremonial head of the town government. Just some things with relationship with staff. Do not micromanage. That's key. It's not good to have an elected official come in every day to try to do the operations of the community. You don't know what the department head is doing and what they have set up for them. So let the manager and the department heads run the day-to-day operations of the town. Recognize and support administrative chain of command. Do not undermine the staff. If there's an issue, tell the town manager. Don't go out in public, or don't even do it at a council meeting. Say, well, I had an issue with employee XYZ. Come to the manager and they'll take care of it. Recognize that the staff has a difficult time trying to satisfy council. What may be a priority of the majority of the council may not be the priority of one member, but we have to serve the majority of the council. And remember, the town manager works for the council, not a councilor. Again, I have to adjust for the council as a whole. And try to get answers from the town manager prior to a meeting. What I always refer that to is, we don't like playing gotcha. Don't ask questions at a meeting just because you want to try to embarrass staff members or, like we said, play gotcha or try to get some agenda push. Try to ask them before so we can be prepared. It helps everybody, helps get the flow of information better. The role of town council is not to deal with staff except for basic inquiry or praise. All local government matters should be funneled through the town manager. Call the town manager for responses to questions, complaints, or concerns. Department heads may answer questions, but let you know, they will let me know that they've talked to a town councilor. Always. Any emails to a town councilor to a department head, any response, I will be CC'd on, just so we know. And the other reason is, we don't like having one town council have information that other members don't have. Everybody should have all the same information when making a decision. So we try to make sure that happens. the town attorney should only go through the manager or the council as a whole. And avoid giving the town manager and staff mixed signals from different counselors. That goes back to what I was saying, that we work for the entire council, not for one counselor. So we want to make sure that, you know, the council passes some policy, then one councilor doesn't like it, that one councilor shouldn't come in and say, well, you shouldn't be doing that. Because the council as a whole passed it. So we need to enforce it as it was passed. Just some general information. The town council meets traditionally on the first and third Wednesday of the month. The agenda closes on the Wednesday prior to the meeting at noon. We do not let any topics be placed on the agenda after that unless it's an emergency. The reason why is we need to prepare the information, get the packets together so you can get those on Friday before. One of the big things that you'll hear quite often, and you'll see the public try to do this, and the council should really refrain, is receiving information and comments by visitors. That's not the time to do that. The staff has not had a chance to review that material, and we're not sure, we would not have all the answers at that point in time. So you may accept it, but I would not allow staff to respond to it until probably the next meeting so we could vet it and get the information. In addition, comes to the comments by visitors, sometimes one thing you always remember is comments, the public has a right to attend a meeting. They do not have a right to participate in a council meeting unless we have comments by visitors. And it should also be, kept to comments, not questions, because it's the same situation. We may not have the answers right there for the individuals asking the questions. So it's not as fair to be able to get the information out. And finally, it's just sort of an overview, what you're actually voting on. There's two main things: ordinances, which are laws adopted by the town council, and resolutions, which set policies or positions of the town council. So those are the only two things you should be voting on, except for nominations. That's why you'd see everything, you have a million resolutions, or once in a while you'll have an ordinance. And that is what I have for the presentation for that orientation. Oops, I don't want to end the meeting. I gotta remember. And that is my presentation. Any questions? Okay.
Great. Thank you. Let's see. Back to my agenda. So the next item on our agenda is any committee reports, and have there been any committee meetings? Nope. So seeing none, I do have a question actually, Steve, about some of the other boards and committees that we serve on. What is the general guidance around? I mean, obviously there are some, the budget committee is meeting. I imagine that the planning board is meeting. I haven't looked at their agendas, but like the energy and environment committee, for example, conservation committee, those other groups.
We're asking if it's not an emergency at this point to, try to hold off. But to continue business, yes, they can meet. We're still allowing use of GoToMeeting to do this. So I know, like you said, budget committee has met, the library trustees have met, conservation commission has met. Land use boards are a little difficult because of the nature of hearings and participation that way. We are working on that. Basically, they're going to be using the Nova system like you are, and all materials will be presented digitally. So members will receive their materials that way. And if there's any presentations, the applicants will have to do it the same way through GoToMeeting. Again, we're trying to prevent Zoom bombing or hijacking of meetings, so we're trying to get the most secure way to do it.
And I mean, you mentioned that the town hall might open at the end of the month, and obviously that's probably more for the day-to-day business, as opposed to having 7 counselors, or, or some of these other boards meet in person. Do you have an anticipated date when that might happen? And if not, like, at what point should we say, okay, we need to meet remotely, even if it's not an emergency necessarily?
Good question. Right now, the order is you still cannot have, even with the stay-at-home 2.0, which I was reading again to see if it was lifted, the governor is still saying we cannot have groups of 10, or we have to be in groups of 10 or less still. So again, the council would meet, I would be there, any staff member or member of the public and also would be there. We couldn't control being under 10. Deny somebody the right to see the meeting or listen to it. So that's why we're still doing it this way. If that number were to go up, we could play it by ear. Much like we do any meeting. Like we also have limits. When this wasn't going on, we had limits on the number of people could be in council chambers just because of fire code. So we just play it by ear that way. If we thought it'd be more than 50, say if it goes up to 25, we think there's gonna be more than 25, we'll move it to the auditorium, or we'll do an emergency situation. And that's the other thing too, is remember, even if it's a group of 10, we still have to be 6 feet apart. So that means the council couldn't meet in council chambers because we're all less than 6 feet apart. So the only place could be the auditorium or the community center or Beach Street. But it's something we have to look at.
Okay. And do you think that, I mean, obviously I know that so much is up in the air, but do you think that by the end of the month, we'll have some idea of how we're going to move forward with that kind of, or no?
I don't think, it depends on, again, what the governor says with the number of people. We can't have like I said, as long as we can't have 10 people, we can't meet in person.
Right. Okay. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Tony, I just wanted to circle back to committee updates, and I do apologize. I was trying to find my notes, but I wasn't having luck. I did want to say really quickly that the budget committee did meet on April 27th. A majority of that meeting was hearing from Steve and Dr. Gibbons. Just so you folks are aware, the budget committee has decided to authorize its statutory authority to request regular updates about budget progress, expenditures, and related. So Steve has been kind enough to show up to the past couple of budget committee meetings, and I'm assuming every coming one, to give us a good update and breakdown to the where we are in terms of our expenditures, and as we're moving through the budget, little things that pop up. I will say that there's probably going to be a request to figure out where that $100,000 has been spent for COVID related items. So maybe just keep that on the front of your mind. But the budget committee has also started.
Can I ask a question? Out of curiosity, I was at the meeting. When did they discuss they were going to ask where the 100,000 went?
You just mentioned it in this meeting, and I know that.
I thought you meant I thought the budget committee requested it already.
No. I have a feeling that it might come up at the next meeting. So, and then the budget committee has been pushing towards meeting still through the summer months. I know we typically take a meeting or two off because there's not much going on. In the past, other committees have taken that time off as well. The budget committee is a notion that they would like to continue meeting regardless if there's anything of significance. But I do think it's helpful. So just keep that in your mind as well, that we will still most likely have meetings going on through the summertime. And I think that was everything. Yeah, I'm good on my end. Thank you.
Great. Were there any other committee reports? Then we don't have any old business. There aren't any assignments, so we just have one resolution in the first reading. And I'm just getting to it. And so I will go ahead and read that. So it's resolution 2019-2020-30 to authorize the town manager to enter into an agreement with Kinsman Corporation to construct the Newmarket, McIntosh, and Tucker Well treatment project. Treatment project is needed to meet the New Hampshire's arsenic limit of 5 parts per billion and safe drinking water standards for supply. And whereas the department has completed the New Hampshire Drinking and Groundwater Trust Fund bidding process, and whereas Kinsman was the lowest bid at $4,735,000, and whereas Wright Pierce recommends awarding the contract to Kinsman Corporation based on the review of their bid, statement of qualifications, references, and letters from Bond Bank Agency. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Newmarket Town Council that the Newmarket Town Council authorizes the town manager to enter into a contract with Kinsman Corporation for $4,735,000 for the Newmarket, McIntosh, and Tucker Well project. Further, the Newmarket Town Council does hereby authorize the town manager to enter into future amendments with notice to the town council. First reading, May 6th, 2020. And is there any correspondence to the town council?
There is none.
And then any closing comments? Councillor Matthews.
Hey, Tony, I just wanted to do business, sorry. So I think in regards to the restaurants opening, and I don't know, I think probably now is the time to talk about this. We might want to start looking at some of our municipal ordinances. In regards to restaurants, it's section 26-53 permit standards. There's things like tables, chairs shall be placed not closer than 2 feet to the sidewalk curb. I mean, I don't think it's going to be possible in some places to even have seating with a 6-foot buffer. Reducing that 2 foot to the sidewalk curb might help fit in some places. In addition, there's a section that says placement of sidewalk cafe or outdoor seating shall be limited to the area of sidewalk directly in front of the restaurant establishment. I mean, I think that for some restaurants, the sidewalk isn't wide enough. So it's going to be some restaurants can do it, some can't. Seems kind of unfair. So I know that there are public places that maybe they could set up. It's more of just a discussion point, is that it seems like we might need to do some ordinance changes to help with restaurants with outdoor seating.
If I may.
Yes.
The first thing is, when it comes to sidewalks, we still have to comply with the ADA. The reason why it has those regulations is you have to be able to get a wheelchair down the sidewalk. So yes, there are parts of sidewalks that you cannot get the proper distance. That happens in every municipality across the state. When we have we do have a few of those here. As it relates to other public spaces, I mean, that would be parks, and we could take that up on a case-by-case basis. I don't think we'd have to amend an ordinance to do that, because we're allowed to allow uses in parks since it's town property. We just have to get permission. There's still questions also about whether or not zoning and planning regulations apply to these restaurant situations. For example, there was a question whether or not if you have a tent out on let's say we could only have 1 or 2 places that could do this, but if you have a large tent and you could get the right seating, could you just move all operations outdoors? And as long as you do not have walls on those tents, you could. As long as, and also it's got to be under 400 square feet. But that's the reason why the sidewalk portion is in there, and allowing diners out on the sidewalk, because we still have to allow for ADA.
So it doesn't sound like we need to make any modifications to the area in front, because we can make a waiver. And I mean, I think the ADA is covered. There's a section that says there must be a 36-inch wide gap. I think this 2-foot thing from the sidewalk curb is different than that, though. It wouldn't remove anything about 36-inch wide area to pass through. I think that's what covers the ADA.
And I guess this is, like, if the council wants to set up a committee to review all the ordinances, more power to it. I think it's just doing it via council meetings like this, it may be less effective because we'd have to be going through. And also, we'd have to see whose authority is it. Is it a plan? I mean, council always has the right to amend an ordinance, but traditionally and typically the planning board also has a time to weigh in. So I would suggest if it's a question about ordinances, maybe form an ordinance committee. I know there was one to look at the charter, that you guys could sit down and review ordinances. But if it's anything to do with, again, I don't have all the ordinances in front of me, and I don't have the building inspector, the code enforcement officer here to make his rulings on that. So I would request that we don't have any discussions without them. And also, if you do so, do it in a workshop, because council business meetings are not the place. This is where you vote on ordinances and resolutions.
Councillor Dumont?
Question for a comment our town manager made. Does our charter committee still exist? Was that sunsetted after our?
Sure.
Okay.
But you could always form. They could always form an ad hoc committee.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be
Just to-
interested in that, Tony.
Just to jump in, I think that they're two separate sort of issues. I mean, one is to look at the ordinances as a whole, which I think is a worthwhile cause for sure, and will be a much bigger project. Anything that's related to this, COVID, these are short-term fixes that I wouldn't feel comfortable changing ordinances to accommodate for these short-term items, because and we went through this not that long ago with just allowing the outdoor alcohol service, which isn't something that we had before. And I think that there needs to be regulations in place for any outdoor seating that we can allow moving forward. I don't think that it should be a blanket, this is just the new normal for the foreseeable future. Ordinances, while they can be changed, I mean, it's a process. And so I think I would feel much more comfortable making small, short-term exceptions versus changing entire ordinances in this case. That's just my opinion. Councillor Finch?
I was going to say the same thing as you. The idea that I do think looking long-term at ordinances, maybe over the course of the next year, might be a good long-term goal, but I don't think I'd rush into making changes for the current situation with COVID. So I do think it's worthwhile to review ordinances, but that's not something I want to change in a month or two or whatever it may be. So I think longer term it's worthwhile though.
Councillor Burns?
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think reviewing the ordinances on a whole is a good endeavor for the long term. But I think, Steve, I think you even mentioned some of this a little bit, that for the things that we have to deal with, coronavirus situation that we're in, those are more just short term, take it as it comes and figure it out for now how we're going to handle this, and then long term look at those ordinances as how some things may change or may not.
Yeah, I think ultimately we're gonna and we've had this discussion with other managers and state organizations. After this is done, much like after any major disaster, operations change. The way we do things are going to change. So I think one thing we keep joking about is kiss snow days goodbye. We don't think you're going to have those probably anymore. But after we do this, we'll review what we did, and if there are adaptations we can make, we'll absolutely make those recommendations. And especially if it's going to streamline our operations and make things more fair. So yeah, absolutely, those are going to be looked at. We do periodically in-house look at ordinances and say, why do we have this, or why is this going on? And we do or why are we missing one? I know Councilor Weinstein still loves the fact that we have a raffle permit license. but we had to have one by state law. So we do look at the ordinances to make sure we try to keep them up to date as well.
And along with that, I think, I forget which news conference this was, but when the governor, I guess it was last week, I've completely lost track of time, when the governor announced this, stay at home 2.0, I think I was watching the conference and emailed Steve immediately to say, what are we going to do to help our businesses in town? And our town manager was already said, these are the steps I'm taking. I'm going to be in touch with the business association president, and we're looking at, ways that we can work with our area businesses. So I know that you've been on it immediately, and I think that having that flexibility is really important for us. And again, I understand the spirit of wanting to change some of our ordinances, but right now, I think it's really more about being flexible and being able to adapt as each phase of this process changes. Hopefully this won't be for forever. Who knows how long we're going to be in this situation. I'm trying to be hopeful and know that this is not, or think that this is not going to be just the new normal, but who knows? So I think we should take things one step at a time. So with that in mind, I'm personally all for forming a committee to do an overview of all of our ordinances. So Councillor Dumont, did you want to say something?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to establish a 3-person ordinance review committee to be sunset when the task is done.
Councillor, could I recommend that we introduce a resolution to do this?
Would it be better as a formal resolution?
Yeah, so you could have an outlined, and the rest of the council can see exactly what the goal of the committee is going to be.
Understood. I will withdraw my motion, and I will send you text to review for our next meeting.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Where were we? Were there any other comments? I'm sorry, Steve, did you want to say something? Oh, okay.
No, I just was closing comments.
Any other closing comments? I had just a couple. Oh, Councillor Dumont, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, do you want to go ahead, Tony?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'll just make mine brief. Over the past couple of weeks, obviously, like most folks, been impacted at work by coronavirus. And out of curiosity, I went to the Reopen New Hampshire protest, their second one that they had this past Saturday, the 2nd. And I would like to say that while there were some folks there who tried to make it a partisan issue, for me, it was about going to hear from what has been a vocal minority of individuals in the state. Right now, surveys and public opinion show that folks are very much behind the governor and the actions that he's taken thus far. And while it may not always seem fair, it's important to, at least for me, to hear what the other side is saying. And I think that there's been a lot of negativity surrounding kind of reopening and going for a more of a fast reopen instead of a stay-at-home 2.0 style of leadership that Governor Sununu has given us. But I would just like to say to my colleagues here and to anybody else who's watching this from home is keep an open mind. Understand that not everybody has the privilege of being able to work from home. Not everybody has the ability to withhold after nearly 6 weeks of not having a regular income. The fact of the matter is a significant majority of Americans who don't have even $1,000 in a basic savings account. And that is really, really hard. So I wanted to commend all of our public servants who have been going above and beyond to try to help move this along, especially the folks at the Unemployment Services Department. Definitely, especially in Newmarket, our churches who have been working to keep the food pantry open, and the number of people who have been selflessly giving to help support the rest of the community. It's trying times like these that show what towns and cities are made of, and I think Newmarket's lucky for the folks that we have, and I am hoping that we can soon bring this to a quick conclusion. And I would also like to say thank you to the synagogue in Durham, who was out there this past Sunday, who's giving out hundreds of masks and gloves. It was a commendable action. If you could make it through the very long line of cars who are waiting. But that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? No, I just wanted to mention a couple of things, or one thing really. So since we last met, I've held now 2 community Zoom meetings, and the third one will, and they've been really well received. We've averaged around 25 to 30 participants for each of the 2 meetings. And certainly everyone is welcome to attend. It's been a nice forum for people to share information. We've had people who have led efforts in the community who have spoken about the work that they've done. We've had town, Steve, our town manager has participated. Our police chief, Rick Molaski, is scheduled to participate tomorrow. He was going to do it last week and got called away. The Newmarket Business Association has participated. Patty Marsden from the Newmarket Community Church, and just lots of other individuals. And so it's been, I think, it's been good for me personally, selfishly, to interact with other people and just to see people. I miss that part of my life. So that was really helpful, but also just to hear what people are doing, what people might need, and for people to share information. Tomorrow, like I said, Rick Molaski is scheduled to be a part of it. And Jamie Dugan from the Stone Church. She was managed the Stone Church, and her and her partner have Dog Rose Farm in Lee, and she also was the person who coordinated the Newmarket Farmers Market. And so she's going to talk a little bit about the farming situation locally, and then I don't know who else might show up. So we just don't know, and the conversation sort of takes on a life of its own a little bit, depending on who's there. We've talked about election information and just whatever topics are pertinent to people. So we'd love to have everyone join, and that's all I had. So seeing no other comments, our next meeting is in 2 weeks. We will have a non-public prior to that meeting. We start that at 6 o'clock. I think that should probably give us a good amount of time. And that's it. Have a great couple of weeks, everybody. Thank you.
You all too.